Hey guys, today's video we're going to talk about using the Viper Scale Racing chassis spreader. So this actually applies to any brand of chassis spreader because the function of the spreader works the same way regardless of what you're going to use it on. So here we have a Viper V1. This is a car we used in the 7 and 8 tooth pinion comparison video. So this car, for some reason, it was built on a stiff chassis, so it probably was some kind of a test car. But a stiff chassis is a perfect one to use this chassis spreader on, because typically, as you can see with how stiff that magnet clip is, the parts are extremely stiff, and it's not very easy to get all of the pieces and parts out of it. So to use the chassis spreader, and kind of just to explain how it works, you put it over top of your motor as so. The little fins on both sides will go down right next to your magnets. It'll fit in between the chassis and the magnets. And when you push this down, these ramps on the side will inevitably spread the chassis out. And if you use thumb pressure to push up on the motor assembly, it'll essentially pop the entire motor assembly up into your spreader. So I'm gonna switch hands and grab my glasses, and I'm gonna try to do this in a way that you guys can see it. So I'm gonna actually use both of my index fingers from underneath. And as I push down, you can see it's opening up the chassis. And now the motor is out of the chassis. So you can remove the traction magnets if you don't want them popping around. But now the motor is out of the chassis, and you can see we have our whole setup here. So it's a little bit harder to use it if the motor's not in there, but you can push it in there, and you can kind of, you know, just squeeze down on it to spread the chassis out. We're gonna go ahead and swap end bells on this thing too, just because my curiosity from the 7 and 8 tooth video, I thought that maybe the end bell was the culprit, so or the lack of being broken in. So we're gonna go ahead and install the motor, which we've used a brush spreader, and we're going to kind of reverse our process here. So right now I like to tilt the motor at a 45-degree angle, and I'm pushing pressure on this forward, and I'm using my two middle fingers to hold the body tubes, and then I just kind of rock it down in there, and I let it sit like so. Okay, so at this point the tabs are touching and the hangers are not allowing the motor to drop down in there. So what I like to do is put pressure on here with my thumb, use the tweezers to push that forward, and you can see it has started to drop down in there. The other side, you know, if you can't pull it far enough forward, you can always close this just a smidge. Now you can see how that's dropped down in there. And at this point, you can use this also, but I actually, because the timing bracket has a ramp on it, I like to just push it down in place at this from here without using the chassis spreader. This is really just for removing it, but now everything kind of snaps down in there. Make sure that your timing bracket is all the way in and that it's engaged on both sides. So you don't want to see any bowing in the chassis through the middle here. And we'll reinstall our traction magnets. Oh my gosh, I just put the motor in backwards. So I didn't pay attention to my magnet orientation when I did my end bell. So this motor, you want to always have the white dot on the passenger side if you're from America. Whoops. And this is going to require us to rotate the end bell assembly because the end bell is clocked. So this is actually pretty hilarious because I've done this probably 25 or 30,000 times. And when you get yapping, that just shows how quick you can make mistakes. So put the traction mags in, putting these in high downforce. High downforce is when the face of the traction magnet that touches the rail will attract to the outside of the car on that given side. So this would be high downforce mode. We want to make sure that the notch on the front of the magnet is going forward so that it slides in the chassis properly. And then the next thing, this is a stiff timing bracket. These are a major like pain to get on. I always push one side in first and I'll get it popped over like that, and you can see it started to kick this traction magnet out, so we want to make sure that that traction magnet is loaded in there. And then from here I will push in the middle and snap it down on there. You never want to pull both sides out and try to drop it down on there. That is not the correct way to do it. So
you look like a chiropractor.
Yeah, yep. Be like, exhale. Okay, there you go. So car's back together. We're gonna put a little drop of oil on the end bell. And like I said, we were really just showing you how to use the chassis spreader. Also got a couple of other tips and tricks in there, but we are going to now, we'll just run back to the track and try this with the new end bell. And see, we still have our data on the board back there. We'll go see if this is faster. So it does have the 7-tooth pinion on it again, so we have to reference it on the 7-tooth pinion data. But if it's faster, it's gonna be faster with the 8-tooth also. So let's go. All right, we're at the track. We're just gonna test it real quick with this end bell just to see if we can go quicker than any of our 800 runs, because that's with the 7-tooth pinion. So let's see what happens first pass with this different end bell. Okay, definitely is faster. So as suspected, that is definitely why. So that's more like what a V-Spec would run, 742. So those of you that watched our last video with the 8-tooth pinion, if you're wondering why that V-Spec was a little bit slow, because it was a oddball end bell. So that's why. It's probably a test car. That's also why it's probably running a stiff chassis, because there's absolutely zero reason to run a stiff chassis on a V-Spec. But hopefully you guys enjoyed the brush spreader part of this video. That was really the chassis spreader part of this video. That was really the brush spreader
part was great.
Yeah, that part happened too. I mean, hey, you know, and the chiropractic moves. We are not licensed chiropractors here, but we know how to crack a chassis or two. So see you on the next one.